Welcome. My name is Stephanie Ivick. I'm the Content Marketing Manager here at eLearning Brothers. We have a great presentation for you today, but first I'll go over a few housekeeping items. This session is being recorded and we'll email a copy of the recording to everyone who registered. If you have any questions at all during the webinar, put them in the questions panel and we will get to them throughout the webinar. If we run out of time and can't get to your question, we will do our best to follow up offline afterwards. If you haven't already, do check out the Rockstars community. It's a great place to connect with other e-learning developers and training professionals and ask questions. Joining me today, we have Mark Stauffer, Senior Manager of Global Learning and Development at Brinks. He is going to be sharing a little bit about their virtual reality journey. So without further ado, Mark, I'll turn the time over to you.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. Appreciate that. Hello, everyone. And I just want to welcome you to this session. I'm really happy that you are attending. Hopefully, you'll get some good information out of this. I first want to apologize. This is normally co-presented by my partner in crime, Annie Levesque. Unfortunately, she's not able to join us today, but I'll be taking all of her parts of this and getting that information out to you as well. So before we begin, I just want to take a quick poll and just kind of gauge everyone's experience with VR, whether you have experience, you don't have experience, just like to see where everybody in the audience is at with that.
All right, the votes are coming in and it looks like right now we have a pretty across the board response, lots of different levels of experience with VR. I'll give it just one more second to make sure everyone gets a chance to share their thoughts, and then I'll show the results on the screen. So here we are. It looks like about almost half are interested in using VR for training in their company. So you guys are in the right place. That's exactly what we'll be talking about today.
Yep, that's great information. And that's exactly where Brinks was about a little over 2 years ago. So what we're going to talk about today is we're going to get into this journey that Brinks took, how they got involved with VR, the different things that they had to plan on using VR, and a lot of the roadblocks that were hit along the way. After we talk about those things, we're going to take a short, not a break, but I'm going to ask for questions. You can ask any questions you have about that section. And then the last half of this will be me giving you suggestions of what I like to use to create VR and the way we create it for Brinks. So without further ado, let me first talk about the different roles at Brinks as far as how Annie and I work together on this. So I am more of the technical person dealing with actually producing VR. Annie is on the project management side, and she manages and deploys global training initiatives that supports all of Brinks' missions and strategies. She also supports, or I should say, we also support all the different countries that need localized global training. So we work for the global side of Brinks, and then there is also a US side, a Mexico side, things like that. So we're dealing with all the different countries. When Annie first joined Brinks, they were working on a project where they needed to help create training for frontline employees. So things like how to service ATMs, how to think about security when you're in the field, things like that. And they started to think about doing this on the job. So basically on the job training, where a seasoned, what are known as messengers at Brinks, would go out with a trainee and teach them on the job. But there were a lot of different issues with that. When you think about working in front of an ATM, it's stressful enough. There's enough security risks. When you're not trying to train somebody else, you really need to be totally focused on what you're doing at that machine. So another way was needed to come up with doing training. So you could do e-learning based training such as Storyline or Lectura or any of the e-learning packages. but it's not really quite like being on the job and doing the training in real life. So it was decided at that point, and this is probably going back about 3 years ago, that VR was just coming into mainstay of training. People were really getting excited about it, and it was decided, well, maybe we should look at some VR options for training, how to train our employees. And it would be risk-free because they would just be, in-house with the headsets on, but they would have a much nicer experience because it would feel like they were actually in front of the machines servicing these things. So a prototype was decided that would be created. So Annie partnered with a bunch of SMEs in the business. She drafted up a rough storyboard. And then that's where I came on board. At the time, I was not a Brinks employee. I had just gotten back actually from Realities 360. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that conference. And it's where I fell in love with VR. So I actually fell in love with two different things there. I fell in love with VR because it was the first time I had ever put a VR headset on, especially for training. And once I put that headset on, my mind was basically blown. I knew that this is kind of a future for training, at least certain types of training. So that was the first thing that happened to me at that conference. The next thing that happened to me is that I went over to a booth, and here they were demonstrating this product called Scenario VR. And that blew me away because when I looked at it and I played with it a little bit, I realized this is just like what I used to create e-learnings. At the time I was using Storyline, and the creators of Scenario VR at the time was Trivantis, who makes Lectora. So it was all very, very familiar, and I knew that I could pick this tool up and immediately start using it because I was so familiar with other tools like this. So Brinks partnered with me, and I was in charge of doing all the video production and then the course development once we had all the videos filmed. Annie had never designed for VR training before, so she relied on her expertise with designing and developing e-learnings. So this is the first big lesson that was learned, because designing for e-learning courseware is not at all like what you would design for VR. She had to gain a new perspective on how to look at how the content and design that content. And when you think of it, VR is 360 degrees. You can see everything in front of you. You can see everything behind you, to side, up and down. So it's a completely different mindset when it comes to at least filming what you're going to film. Now, with that said, let me just stop here for a second and explain a couple differences. There are two major differences of VR. There is 360 degree video VR, which is you take a camera, you put it in a location, and you start shooting video, and then you place that video inside of a production tool like Scenario VR. And then you can add things like hotspots and, documents inside of it and other buttons and all sorts of things to make it interactive for the end user. The other type of VR, which is much more complicated to produce, and I'm not talking about any of that here, is known as 6 Degrees of Freedom VR. And that has to be built with a game generation software, because everything in that space in VR is not real at all. You're not seeing any real pictures, you're not seeing any real video, you're simply seeing all 3D generated and animated things in front of your face. The positive part of that is that you can do some really cool stuff with 6 Degrees of Freedom. You can pick things up in the VR space, you can manipulate things in the VR space, but again, it's all computer generated. None of it is real. The downside is the learning curve to create that is so much higher than it is for what I'm talking about here, which is 3 Degrees of Freedom with 360 degree video. It's much easier to produce this, it's much cheaper to produce it. So the first thing that had to be learned was the prototype and how to design it. Annie completely knew how to design e-learning, was a little frustrated at first with designing VR. So what we ended up doing, we created a storyboard template. Now this looks different than a standard e-learning storyboard template. We do have things like, okay, what the voiceover is going to be, what the talent is going to be saying, any other types of audio. We also have things about the camera, which cameras we're using, what they're going to be shooting, things like that. That's all on the VR side, but we also have things that would be on the e-learning side, such as knowledge checks or questions. What are we going to ask? What hotspots are we going to use? So it's kind of a combination of a typical e-learning storyboard and a virtual reality storyboard. Everything is in this one place. Then on this side, this is where we show, okay, here's the user of the VR, and anything between these two red lines is what they're going to see, at least at the beginning. So we put some notes here to say, okay, here is what the user is going to be seeing. We can show with a little green dot, I don't have any on this particular page, but where the hotspots might be that they were looking at, things like that. And then if there are other important things back here, we could also indicate those things so that when the user turns around, that's what they're going to see. So this storyboard really helped out a lot, and it made Annie and other people understand, okay, this is what it takes to actually create a VR. So I was brought on board to shoot the first prototype, and here we are outside of a location. This is the camera that I'm using. Well, this is the camera right here, if you can see. Let me highlight that. So right there is the camera, and I actually have one here. They're not big. Whoops, let me go this way. They're not big. This one is a GoPro Max. It's got two lenses on it, and it can shoot 360-degree video all the way, you know, that you see everything around you and all the way from the top to the bottom. Here we are talking to the talent, and we're getting ready to shoot that. And then once it's shot, and we have all our video produced, then we bring it into Scenario VR. And I just have a little screen capture here of Scenario. You have all your different scenes over here. Each scene has multiple objects in it. You can set little flags at the bottom that when the video gets to a certain point, these flags have triggers inside of them, just like an e-learning would have, to fire something off, whether it be a question or maybe to pause the video, things like that. So if you've never seen Scenario VR before, it's a very easy, straightforward, very low learning curve to understand how it works. Okay, so we had the prototype filmed, we had it produced. So now we had to get buy-in from our leadership. So Annie presented it to the leaders in HR, in legal, and also in operations, using what we've produced in Scenario VR. And also at the time, the Oculus Go goggles were very popular. And they were a very good goggle. They were about $300, maybe even a little bit less than that. It seemed like a great solution for Brinks. We could support those goggles, and the leaders were really, really excited about this. And we got the green light to move forward with the first actual VR project that would get sent out into the field. So the second lesson that was learned was going from the prototype to the first pilot. As we were developing the first pilot, we met with the subject matter experts, we met with everybody involved, and we quickly realized that everybody wanted everything in this VR training. And we had to have a lot of discussion based on maybe VR isn't the right fit for every little nuance of what you want to train. So I kind of stepped in a little bit and I said, look, we only want to train the things that aren't really easily repeatable and things that you want to be able to show them that they can look at over and over again and do a better job at their day-to-day jobs and, in essence, save Brinks money in the end. There were some errors that were happening in the field, and that was the main thing that we wanted to avoid with this VR training, was to give the end user the ability to understand where those errors could take place and how to alleviate those errors when they're actually working on these machines in the field. So it was decided to use a blended learning approach, and we had to set the expectations for that early on. So it ended up that the training for this is actually partly in documents, partly in e-learning, and now partly in VR, depending on which parts needed to go into which section of learning. So now we get into the first pilot, and this is where we really learned some lessons. So we were all set to go with Oculus Go. We were on this highway. We had Oculus Go picked. We're ready to deploy it to Oculus Go. It's an all-in-one headset. And what I mean by that is it's basically a computer on your face. There is a computer inside the headset, and you download the information to that computer. It's got a screen in there, a very high quality screen. And when you put it on, you really feel like you are basically wherever you've been transported to with what's inside the VR. Extremely good quality. It was very widely used at the time. The first major issue that we hit, though, was Facebook. Facebook ended up buying Oculus right around the same time. And right before we went to pilot, we started to view the VR in the Oculus Go headsets and realized that we need a Facebook login now to even use the headset. Well, when you think about Brinks and the amount of security that's involved, that was a complete game changer. We could not use the Oculus Go because there was no way around at the time of getting around that Facebook login. So we had to come up with another plan. So we detoured off to this little side road. And what the plan was at that point was to use a mobile phone and VR goggle, and then also set it in Google Cardboard mode. So what I'm going to show you, this is actually a Google Cardboard that I got when I was at that show back in 2017 or whenever it was. So this is why they call it Google Cardboard, because this is just a box. But on this side of the box are two lenses, if you've never seen one of these before. And the box opens up, and you basically place your phone inside the box. This is really hard to do when you're backwards. You place your phone back here, and you close it up, and you set your phone to whatever the VR course or game or whatever it might be is, and then you view it through this box. So that's why it's called Google Cardboard. There's a slightly better way to do this. You can purchase these VR headsets on Amazon or anywhere, and there's absolutely nothing in this except a couple of lenses. So what you do is you pull out the slot, you put your phone into this slot, you slide it in, and now you have a VR headset that you can put on your head. So it's a little bit more robust, it's a little bit safer to do it that way. So what we decided with going forward and getting around this roadblock was to go with an iPhone, because Brinks uses iPhones for other things in the company, and they were easily, purchased and distributed. We decided to go with a plastic VR goggle, and we decided to put the course then into what's called Google Cardboard mode. So it's when you bring it up on your phone, it actually splits the screen on the phone and allows you to view it in a goggle, and it all looks pretty good. I don't think it looks nearly as good actually when you put an all-in-one headset on, but it does look okay, and you can get away with it. Another thing, a reason it was kind of a good idea to go with the phones was because where this training was going to be used in a lot of the different branches across the United States, there's very limited Wi-Fi in those branches. So it kind of made sense because we could just use the phone and the cellular network to get information back and forth from the phone. So it kind of made sense at the time. Now, we also hit another very strong learning piece at this point. So after we filmed the prototype and I had the tripod and I had the camera on the tripod, it was thought, well, let's try to make this a little bit more like it's the person wearing the goggles is actually performing the tasks on these ATMs. So we got this messenger who was our actor, and you very rarely saw him because we mounted the camera up here on a helmet. We thought this is a great idea because now everyone will be able to see exactly what he's seeing, and you could see his hands when they came forward, things like that, and it made a lot of sense. And we shot all the video. We looked at the video on a laptop, and it looked great. We're like, this is going to be fantastic. We are going to be able to, basically get away with doing 6 degrees of freedom on a 3 degree of freedom headset. And so we did all that. We brought all the video home, and I started to produce it. I got everything edited. I put it in the scenario. Everything was working great. And then I viewed it in a headset. And there was a huge pothole that entered the road once I did that. And that pothole was immediate motion sickness when I was viewing it on the headset. It looked great when I was viewing it on a laptop or anybody else was viewing it on a laptop, or even on just a phone when you're just holding the phone in front of your face. But once you put the headset on, I couldn't even keep the headset on for more than a few seconds. It just caused so much motion sickness. So at that point, it was thought, well, okay, what are we going to do now? We have all this video shot. I can't fly back out to the location and reshoot video the way I probably should have shot it in the first place. So what we ended up doing, we took that 360 video and kind of massaged it a little bit and turned it into 180-degree video. We still showed it in the headsets, but now it was shown in a picture-in-picture frame within the headset. So it made it much easier to view. Actually, it made it fine to view. They're still using that today. But it just didn't have the same 360-degree feeling to it like most VR has. So what we learned from that was always shoot your 360 video from a fixed tripod location. That's the best way to go. If you're shooting 360 video, make sure it's on a stable mount. Don't put it on somebody's head. Don't put it on a moving vehicle or anything like that. Just put it on a tripod and let the person that's looking at the VR just experience everything that's around them by turning around. That's the best way to do it. But going forward, we still wanted to get kind of that, the feeling of the messenger actually interacting with what they were looking at in front of them. And we came up with some ideas. We ended up using a second camera. So I still use the camera on the tripod. So I have this camera here on the tripod. Put that right there. However, I have a secondary camera. Let's see where I can get this so you can see it. And this has a little magnetic bracket on the back. And I am wearing a lanyard that has the opposite magnet. And if you can see this, now that camera is safely mounted to my chest. And that's exactly what we did to this messenger in our next project. We placed that camera right on his chest so that it acts kind of like a body cam. And the result of that, this is the actual 360 image from the first camera that we shot. But this image in the box is his body cam camera that we used. And they're perfectly synced together. They were running at exactly the same time. So all that I had to do in post-production was to put the two video streams together, put one in a picture-in-picture box. And now we have the best of both worlds. We have the 360 where you can look around in this entire room and see everything that's around you. We also have exactly what the messenger is looking at. So that's how we ended up coming with an idea to fix that problem of the motion sickness. Now I do, excuse me, I do want to explain why this is curved up here. This is a 360 image, but it's in a flat screen. So if I were viewing this in the goggles, you would not see this curve. It would be, as you moved your head, this box would follow your head basically, and it would look perfectly square. Okay, the fourth lesson learned. So we were going forward with our iPhone and the plastic VR goggles and the Google Cardboard. Everybody was happy. We had tested all of our courses on iPhones, an iPhone 6, an iPhone 8, an iPhone 10. However, we decided, well, iPhone 12 is the latest and greatest that was out at the time. We figured the screen is going to be fabulous looking. You know, the speed of it going through the course is going to be great. Let's go with an iPhone 12. So iPhone 12s were ordered for all of the different pilot sites. There were 5 at the time. Problem was we couldn't get the iPhone 12 to test prior because they were being shipped directly to the branches that we were going to be sending the pilot off to. And all of a sudden, everything failed. That day, the first day of that pilot was horrible. I thought, I'm out of a job because everything is crashing and burning, and nobody had a reason to understand why. Like I said, we had tested it like crazy on other iPhones, and it worked great. But what was happening on the iPhone 12, it would run for about, I think it was about 3 minutes, and then it would just freeze and stop. So we went to support at eLearning Brothers for Scenario VR, and they said, no, it should run fine. You know, there's no reason. And then everybody started doing research, and we realized that Apple, in their infinite wisdom, no longer supported the little piece of code on those phones that allowed the course to be running Google Cardboard, because apparently Apple is coming out with their own version. So it was actually from iPhones 11s forward that they stopped supporting the cardboard mode on those phones. So that's why it worked on the older phones, but not the newest phones. So we were scrambling at that point. We had people that were going to be piloting this. We had people at different branches that have traveled to those branches to figure out, you know, to get these pilots running, and now nothing's working. So thankfully at the time, and I really just stumbled across this, I found another goggle called the Pico G2 4K. This is another standalone goggle. I have one right here, the Pico, and it's standalone. It has the screen inside of it. You don't have to put any phone in it. You can download stuff to it. This runs off the Android operating system. But the cool thing about these, they're very similar to the Oculus Go, but there's no security risk with them because Pico only deals with enterprise companies. They don't deal with the general public. So they are very, very secure devices. And they fit a need for us at a time when we really needed that need fulfilled. So we got a couple samples in. We tested like crazy on those devices. Everything was working great. It actually looked way better on the Pico than it did on the phones in the plastic sleeves. So it was decided that we would go ahead with the Pico devices. So what we learned here, and this is a big one, always test on your deployment device before you deploy. If you have to push your deployment date out, do that. Do not take a chance that what you've created, even though it runs great on a laptop or a desktop or whatever, if you haven't looked at it yet on what you're going to be finally deploying your courses on, don't let it go out. So this is where we're at now. So we had the first pilot. That was the one that crashed and burned. We were at 5 locations. We scrambled and got the Pico devices in. We did a second pilot with 9 locations and 45 devices total. That ran great. So now we're in the, and that was last March, last April, now this July through October, we're in our launch phase. So our courses now are going out to 10 different regions across the United States, and we're dealing with 430 additional devices, so about 475 devices total, all across the US. So we're using those Pico the headsets, and we're also using a piece of software called Manage XR. And what Manage XR does, it allows you to remotely manage all of your devices. Here's a quick screenshot of it. And you can see that we have all of our different branches set up. You can see how many devices are each branch. But the cool thing is you can see where these things are located. Based on the last time that they were powered up, you can get an approximate idea, and you can even drill into this further to the street level to see, approximately where that device is located. It shows things like battery level. It shows what is actually installed on each device. So it's a fantastic tool. If you are going to set up VR for a company and you want to do this, across many locations, it's definitely worthwhile to go with a program such as Manage XR to do your. I don't know how we would do it otherwise. We can set up devices very quickly through this tool instead of having to go, and set each one individually. It's a very manual task doing it that way, but with Manage XR, it's still a manual task, but it's so much faster than it is if I had to just log in the Wi-Fi and download each course and things like that. So definitely worth the investment. Okay, so we covered a lot so far, and this is where your journey starts. I would like to see if, Stephanie, if there's any questions out there so far.
Yes, we do have a few questions about this. So let's go with this one. Do you have a specific set of questions or a triage model that you use to determine what format the e-learning should be in, like e-learning, classroom, VR, blended? How did you make that decision?
So I can't speak on the e-learning part of it, but I can speak on the VR part of it. So there's plenty of research and data out there. If you are dealing with something that is dangerous, that's a perfect example for VR, because you can repeat it over and over and over again without somebody getting hurt. So if you think of, Frank's, it's perfect. It's a dangerous job. So we don't want them out in the field trying to learn this stuff. We want them to be able to learn it inside and then go out in the field, and they'll already have the knowledge that they need. But you think of things like firefighting, or I saw a great example once of insurance claims for cars. So what insurance agents used to do was actually crash a car and crash it in different ways. Well, that gets extremely expensive to do. And then they would train their people how to do insurance adjustments on that. Now through VR, you can simulate a car crash through 3D modeling and have the people go through that and then just reset it, and you're spending very little at that point to do that. Empathy training is also a really good use of VR. So if you want to do something like how to hire someone and how to interview someone, that's a great thing to do, because you could set that up and you're actually looking at the person across the table from you, and you can get questions that pop up on the screen. Have the interviewee ask you a question, and then have some dialog boxes pop up on the screen with different choices that you can make of how you would answer that question. And that's a great way to do it. So you don't have to bring in actors, you don't have to bring in people to try to train on this live. So anything that could get expensive or could be very dangerous to replicate, that's something that's great for VR.
Great, thank you. When you were testing with the phones, did you experience any lagging issues when you were using the phones and data versus high-speed Wi-Fi?
We definitely did, and there was one other thing I forgot to mention with the phones. Another thing that was happening with the phones that were actually working was when we put them into those the plastic goggles, after about 15 minutes, the phones would act, and this is in an area, and let me preface this, it's in an area of a branch where it gets really hot, and there's not a lot of airflow in some of these branches. So, when it's 80, 85 degrees inside the branch location, everything's going to heat up, right? So, but what was happening, the phones were heating up, and then the phones were just locking up, and they would have to be taken out of the goggles and let them, relax after that. We don't have any kinds of problems like that with the all-in-one headsets. The lag was also an issue. There was some, especially once they were off Wi-Fi, there could be an issue with lag. Now, with the all-in-one phones, everything is downloaded to, I'm sorry, not the phones, the all-in-one headsets, everything's downloaded to the headset. So you have all your courseware on your headset. You don't need to be connected to Wi-Fi. You don't need to be connected to a cellular network for them to work. They just work.
Awesome. All right. And then one last question, which I think might segue well into your next section. When you chose the Picos, did you do a comparison between those and the Quest 2s, or was the Quest just dead to you because of Facebook login?
Yeah, Quest wasn't an option because it was Facebook, and it's the same type of thing. Now, let me also say Facebook came up with a thing called, I can't think of it off the top of my head. Oculus for Business, I think it's called. And that is, you don't need a Facebook login for that. However, there's obviously an additional charge for that, and it's I think it's a yearly subscription. But we'd already chosen the Pico before that, and we really liked the company Pico and what they stood for as far as just dealing with enterprise. Now, the Quest 2, yes, we could have done it on a Quest 2 or whatever the latest one is. Pico has higher models too. They used to have one called the Neo 2. Now they just released the Neo 3. These are great headsets. However, they also do the 6 degrees of freedom, where you actually have 2 hand controllers and you can pick things up, so on and so forth. Since we're not developing VR for that yet, there's no reason to spend, the extra $100, $200 per headset to go with those. So we just decided to stay with the 4K.
Okay, all right. One last question. The chest camera that you had hanging on your lanyard, was that one recording 360 or just regular video?
That was only, so it's also a GoPro Max, which can do 360, but anybody that's used a GoPro before, they have something called Hero Mode, which is 180 degrees. There was no reason to shoot in 360 with that because it can only see what's in front of you anyway. Okay. The cool thing about that magnet, though, you can actually attach that to other things. So, like when I'm shooting inside of a truck, the truck is, entirely metal. So I can take that camera and just plop it right up against the side wall and it sticks. You could put it on the outside of a truck if you wanted to. So if you wanted to shoot 180 video of a truck, from the point of view of the truck driving down a street, and it's a really, really strong magnet, it's not going to fall off. You could just stick it to the side of a truck or a car or whatever, and it's going to stay there. So it's a really good option.
Awesome. Yeah, that's really cool. All right, no more questions, so I will let you get on to the next section.
Okay. You see, we're getting a little low on time, and I have a little bit more to go through, so I will try to do this as quickly as possible so we can go through some more questions. So what are you going to need for your journey? So these are the things that I'm using, and I've suggested. You don't have to go this route. There's plenty of options out there. It's just what I've chosen. So first, you have to have a 360 camera, obviously, right? If you're going to shoot 360 video, you have to have a camera that can shoot 360 video. There's plenty of options out there. You can get a 360 camera. You can actually get I forget what it's called, but it's a device that sticks on top of your iPhone, plugs into your one of the ports. I guess it's the fire or the lightning port, and it's a little camera. And you just hold your phone up, and it's got 2 lenses on it, either side, and you can turn your phone into a 360 camera. So you can get cameras for as little as like $100 to $150, all the way up to literally tens of thousands of dollars, based, depending on how good you want this video to be. Now, the ones that are tens of thousands of dollars, they're for shooting 360 like iMac or IMAX, I should say, movies. You don't need that. We get very good results from the GoPro I might spend a little bit more for a slightly better camera. Well, when I say a little bit more, it's quite a bit more. The one camera that I'm looking at for the future, it has 6 lenses on it. Now this one has 2, one on the front, one on the back. The one I'm looking at has 6, and the cool thing about it is it takes a separate SD card for every single lens. So you need 6 SD cards per camera, but that gives you really, really high quality video. And that goes for about $5,000. So you can spend a decent amount of money on a camera, but to get started, you don't need to. Extra batteries. You can't chintz out on this or cheap out on this. You have to have extra batteries because the camera will burn through them very quickly. So I'm using 2 cameras during a shoot. I always have a battery in each camera, obviously, to use it, but I also have a separate battery for each camera that's always charging when I'm shooting, so that once my camera batteries run out, I can just swap them, put the ones in the cameras into the charger, and vice versa. You're going to need plenty of SD cards. Depending on how much you film, you will go through SD cards, and you need fast SD cards for this. Don't get, the bottom bargain basement SD cards. Make sure that you get ones that are rated for your camera. And your camera, when you buy your camera, it'll tell you which ones they recommend as far as the rating on the SD card goes. Get a tripod. You're going to need it, but get a good tripod. You can get a tripod for like $15. You've just spent, and I don't know if I said this or not, these cameras go for about $500. So I just spent $500 on a camera. I don't want my tripod getting knocked over easily or blown over by the wind. This is an aluminum tripod. Yeah, it costs a little bit more, probably about $100, but it's a very heavy duty tripod. It's very sturdy. It never moves. It will move if you hit it though with something. See, it's got a low or high center of gravity, whatever that is. And I'll explain that in a minute. You also need a very high-end laptop or desktop to produce this stuff. I have an Alienware desktop, and what I found is gaming computers are great for this stuff because they're made to process a lot of information. And when you're using a piece of editing software, that also needs a tremendous amount of information and needs a really good graphics card. So don't think that you're going to do this on, your company's old Lenovo laptop that has, 8 gig of memory in it, and it's 7 years old. It's just not going to work because you're publishing a lot of information. You can get away with a lower end laptop and lower end memory. It's just going to take you longer to produce, and it will possibly crash a lot. So I would spend some money on either a laptop or a desktop. Okay, what I recommend besides these must-haves, if you're going to be traveling to do this, get a flight case. So I'm showing some suitcases here. The first time I went out on the road with my equipment, I put them in a suitcase, and I was having anxiety the entire trip because I was just waiting for a suitcase to get run over by an airport truck or something like that. So get a flight case. I have a flight case here. I don't know how well you can see it. But there it is, and it's got dividers in it. It's got little bags in the lid. It's waterproof. It's dustproof. They're not that expensive. I think that one was like $80 at Harbor Freight Tools. It's a great thing to protect your investment. Secondary audio recorder. Now, what this is, all the cameras, or most of the cameras, have microphones on them, and they're actually pretty decent microphones. I mean, this thing has 2 microphones on it. You can't even see them, really. There's a little one here and a little one here, and they actually do a pretty decent job. The problem with them is that it will pick up a lot of room noise. And if you want to get dialogue between 2 different people, I suggest getting this next item also, some wireless mics. So I have 2 wireless mics with lavalier clips that clip right on the shirts. And then I have a secondary audio recorder. And what that does, it allows you to record your audio on a different device other than what's coming into your video stream. And you can just match them all up at the end when you're in post-production. Get an LED light. Now, these are a little tricky because you can't always place them in your shot, because if you remember 360 video, you see everything that's in, in the room or outside or wherever. So always try to shoot in a well-lit room, or if you're outside, always obviously try to shoot during the day when it's not necessarily sunny, but it's bright. If you need an LED light, and I actually use this for, where am I at here? I actually use this for the last shoot. You're going to need to hide it somewhere. So, put it behind a bookcase or a plant, or just so somebody can't see it. I actually have mine attached to the tripod, and that works pretty well, because looking down, there are little tricks that you can use to hide the tripod, little piece of tripod that you would see. But the only time you see that is when the person using the VR headset looks straight down. So LED light's good to have. You're always going to want to use extra, or find extra mounting hardware. For the cameras, you never know where you might need to place a camera, so extra mounting hardware is good. This next piece is, I really should say that this is a must-have if you're using multiple cameras and or a secondary audio device, and that is a slate. Now, you're probably thinking, well, that's a little overkill. These things are cheap. I think this was like 12 bucks. There's two reasons I use this. So I'm shooting video on two different cameras. I'm shooting audio on a secondary audio device. I use this to identify all of those different clips. I ended up, for the last project I ended up having over 150 different clips. And when the clips get saved to the camera and or the secondary audio device, they're always in a sequential number order. So if you hop into that then, and you're trying to figure out, okay, what scene was this? Where is this in my production? All of that. You hold this up against the cameras. At first, you say everything that's on this slate pretty much. And then the second reason you use this is to get that click sound. And what that does, that allows you to synchronize everything up when you're in post-production, because your audio waveforms will have a little spike. And all you have to do is match those spikes up for all of the different pieces that you're using. So my two videos and my secondary audio recorder, I just match everything up, put them all in line, and then everything is perfectly synced. You're going to need an iPad or an iPhone or both. And why you need that is because the cameras, even though you can set them up without any external devices, it's easier to control them remotely from an iPad or an iPhone. So this is my little rig. It's not really that little. I'm going to get this in the frame. So down here is my secondary audio device. This iPad controls my primary camera, which is my 360 camera, and this iPhone controls my secondary camera, or the 180 camera, that chest camera. So I have everything right here. I can just look at it and say, okay, everything is recording, hit action, and we're ready to go. So it's just nice to have that and be able to see everything that you're doing, because it gets crazy on site. There's a lot going on, so you want to try to make it as easy as possible. Okay, other things that are nice to have, and I'll go through this really quickly. This first one is it looks a little weird, but it's a tripod weight. Now, this one is not filled at the moment, but you fill this with water. It's got little Velcro straps on it. You attach that to the bottom of your tripod, and that tripod will not fall over even if it gets hit by something. This is super important to have. This is a charging block. So I can charge regular USB, any USB devices. I can also charge, wrong side. I can also charge my laptop off of this just by plugging it into the AC outlet on it. And if I want to, you can even jump start a car with that up here. Where is that? Right here. But it also has a flashlight, which is really nice. So I just keep this charged all the time, because a lot of times if you're outside, you don't have access to power. So you may need a good charge for your stuff. And all this stuff takes batteries, whether they be regular, always have plenty of batteries too. I have cases of batteries here, but everything takes the batteries, whether it's the wireless mics, the cameras, everything. So you're going to need to charge stuff up. And then finally, This is a really nice to have. This is not necessary, and they're a little expensive, but this is a camera gimbal. So I can actually mount one of the cameras in here. You wouldn't use this for 360. It's only strictly for the 180 videos, but I could follow somebody around with this, and there's 2 little servo motors in this. You charge it up, you turn it on, and it keeps the camera completely steady. So these are also known as a steady cam. Okay. Software, real quick. 360 video stitching software. Now, this normally comes with the camera. It's not necessarily something you have to buy. Sometimes it's actually built into the camera. Those higher end cameras, you don't have to use any external software. With the GoPro, you do. It's just one extra step that you have to do. But what stitching does, it takes, if you think of a video, it's got a left side and a right side. Well, stitching takes those 2 sides and brings them together in the middle, and you have a stitch point where the left side meets the right side. That's why you can get a 360-degree video out of that. So all your videos have to be stitched. They also need to be converted typically. Codec conversion, in order for them to work on a device, and the device will tell you what format your video needs to be. They're all MP4 files, but they need to be a certain codec so that they are compressed properly. I use a tool called Handbrake. It's been out forever. It's free and works really, really well. You can also get the Adobe product, which is Media Encoder, and that's part of the Adobe Creative Cloud. Now, I'm going to have a lot of Adobe products in here in parentheses. That's just because I do use them from time to time, but I also use the ones that are not in parentheses. So Magic Vegas Pro, I love that. That's my video editing software, and I use that to do that picture-in-picture and other effects within the video itself in post-production. You can also use something as easy as TechSmith Camtasia. I've used that too. Now, it's not nearly as robust as something like a Vegas Pro or a Premiere, but if you're just doing simple editing, it will work fine for you. Audio editing, I use another Magix product called SoundForge. There's also the Adobe version is Audition, but the free one, Audacity, I'm sure that many of you have possibly used that before. That's a great audio editor. So, there's no reason you couldn't or shouldn't use that. For graphics editing, I use the Magix product. Again, it's called Zara Designer Pro, but there's also Photoshop. If you need, so what would you need to use graphics editing for? So remember I said if you look straight down, you see parts of the tripod. You can mask that out using a graphics editing program. Basically, you create a mask in your video, and then you fill that mask in with something that you've created in your graphics program. And there are other reasons that you would use it. Real quick one, I don't have a picture of this, I should have made one, but when we shot at one of the locations of our customers, we had parked the truck, and I was shooting video from the truck's perspective. Well, when the user turns around, they see a big no parking sign behind them, which we thought, oh, some people might think, well, that was really bad because the truck parked there. So what I ended up doing was I changed what was on that sign to something else. So I did that through the graphics editing program. And finally, you're going to need VR editing software. And like I said, I'm a big fan of Scenario. There are other ones out there now. Scenario was probably one of the first, though. And I'm very, very happy with the results that we get from that. Okay, that pretty much wraps it up. I'm going to leave my contact information and Annie's contact information up here. But are there any other questions, Stephanie?
It doesn't look like we have any questions right now. I think that's just a credit to the thoroughness of your presentation. Usually we have people asking, what camera, what software, but you answered all of those, so that is awesome.
Great. Oh, can I mention one other thing?
Yeah, of course.
eLearning Brothers, the creators of Scenario VR, have graciously invited me to DevLearn coming up next month. So I'm going to be on one of the eLearning Brothers stage, I should say the eLearning Brothers stage. I think I'm there Wednesday. I forget what the exact date is, the 21st maybe, at 3:15. I'm going to be basically going through the same exact presentation, but if anybody's going to DevLearn, I would love to meet you if you would come up afterwards. And if you have any questions then, I'd be happy to talk to you, about those. So
That is awesome. Yes, if you're at DevLearn, definitely stop by the ELB booth and say hi to Mark, say hi to everybody else. It's always a good time at our booth at DevLearn. And all right, so thank you so much, Mark. This has been awesome. I am going to take over the screen very briefly just for my last. All right, you guys should be seeing this wonderful information. If you're interested in trying Scenario VR and building your own VR training course, you can get a free trial for 30 days from our website, and I also posted the link to that in our chat. So that is a great option to try out Scenario VR. As I mentioned earlier, we also have the Rockstars community. We have a forum on there for Scenario VR, so you can post all of your questions about building immersive training in there, and someone from eLearning Brothers or another user will be happy to help you out. Thank you so much for this, Mark. We all learned a lot. It was a fascinating look at all of the lessons learned. Thank you so much, and we hope to see everybody on our next webinar.
Thank you, Stephanie, and thank you everyone that attended. I really appreciate it.
All right, thank you. Have a great day, everyone.